I'm Abigail Mitchell, 28 years old, and for most of my life, I've lived in the shadow of my perfect older sister. 2 weeks ago, during our usual family dinner, my mother looked me straight in the eyes and sneered, "You'll never be as good as your sister." Something inside me finally broke that night. After years of comparisons and put-downs, I decided enough was enough. This is the story of how I finally stood up for myself and what happened afterward. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if this story resonates with you, please hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, the journey I'm about to share might just give you the courage to stand up for yourself too. Growing up in our upper-middle-class home in Boston, the Mitchell family appeared picture-perfect from the outside. Our colonial-style house with its manicured lawn and white picket fence concealed the complicated dynamics that shaped my childhood and early adult years. My sister Kimberly, now 31, was the golden child from day one. She breezed through school with straight A's, graduated from Harvard Law with honors, and now works as a senior corporate attorney at one of Boston's most prestigious firms. She married her college sweetheart, Nathan, and they live in a beautiful brownstone in Beacon Hill. From the outside, her life seems flawless, curated like a magazine spread. Then there's me, Abigail, Abby to my friends. I work as a graphic designer at a small agency downtown. My apartment is modest but filled with color and creativity. Art has always been my passion, though my mother made sure I understood it was merely a hobby and not a real career path. Our mother, Diana Mitchell, is a former beauty pageant winner who never quite let go of her glory days. Her appearance is always immaculate, not a hair out of place, designer clothes, and perfect makeup even for a quick trip to the grocery store. She values success, appearance, and social standing above all else. In her world, there's no room for mediocrity or failure. My father, James Mitchell, is a successful investment banker who spent most of my childhood at the office. He's quiet, reserved, and has always been emotionally distant. While he rarely participated in my mother's direct comparisons, his silence was its own form of complicity. Occasionally, though, I'd catch a sympathetic glance from him when my mother was particularly harsh. Our family home was a shrine to Kimberly's achievements. The living room shelves displayed her countless trophies and awards, debate team championships, academic excellence certificates, tennis tournament victories. My few art contest ribbons were tucked away in a drawer in my bedroom. It was as if my accomplishments weren't worth displaying. I still remember the day I brought home my first art award in 6th grade. I was bursting with pride, having beaten out students from several other schools. My mother glanced at the certificate and said, "That's nice, dear. Did you see Kimberly was named valedictorian today?" My achievement vanished in the shadow of my sister's greater accomplishment. School was particularly difficult. Teachers who had Kimberly before me always had the same response when they saw my last name on their roster. "Oh, Mitchell? Are you Kimberly's sister?" She was such an exceptional student. The comparison was implicit in their disappointed expressions when they realized I didn't share her academic prowess. While Kimberly captained the debate team and student council, I found refuge in the art room. Mrs. Calloway, my high school art teacher, was perhaps the only adult who saw me for myself rather than as Kimberly's lesser sister. She encouraged my creativity and helped me develop my skills, telling me I had a unique perspective that deserved to be shared. But even my passion for art became another point of comparison. When I was accepted into Boston Arts College rather than an Ivy League school like my sister, my mother's reaction was tepid at best. "Well, I suppose it's better than no college at all," she said as she folded laundry, not even looking up to acknowledge my excitement. Kimberly's high school experience was the stuff of teen movies. She was prom queen, dated the football captain, and graduated with the highest honors. Mine was quieter. I had a small circle of friends who shared my interest in art and music. I skipped prom altogether to attend a gallery opening with my art club. My mother didn't speak to me for days afterward, lamenting the photos she wouldn't have to display next to Kimberly's prom queen portrait. The constant comparisons shaped my self-perception. I began to see myself as inherently less than, less intelligent, less attractive, less worthy. I developed coping mechanisms, primarily trying to fly under the radar. If I didn't try too hard or put myself out there would be fewer opportunities for comparison and disappointment. By the time I graduated high school with a B+ average, respectable by most standards but underwhelming compared to Kimberly's perfect 4.0, I had internalized the message that I would always be second best. The saddest part was that I had begun to accept it as truth. Kimberly, for her part, was never deliberately cruel. She seemed uncomfortable with our mother's comparisons but never challenged them either. Our relationship became increasingly distant as we grew older, more like polite acquaintances than sisters. The unspoken competition created a barrier between us that neither knew how to breach. As we entered adulthood, I held on to a faint hope that perhaps the comparisons would finally end. After all, we were on different paths now, pursuing different careers. But I quickly learned that adulthood simply provided my mother with new metrics for comparison. The comparisons didn't stop when we became adults, they just evolved into more sophisticated forms of emotional manipulation. Kimberly's wedding 3 years ago was a lavish affair at the Boston Harbor Hotel. My mother spent months planning every detail, from the custom-designed dress to the imported flowers. The society pages covered it extensively, and my mother made sure to mail copies to everyone she knew. Meanwhile, my dating life consisted of a series of short-lived relationships that never seemed to work out. Each time one ended, my mother would sigh and say, "Well, not everyone can find their Nathan." When Kimberly and Nathan bought their brownstone in Beacon Hill, my mother threw them a housewarming party that resembled a small wedding reception. She hired caterers and even a string quartet. My one-bedroom apartment in Somerville received no such celebration. Instead, when she visited for the first and only time, she spent 30 minutes suggesting ways I could improve it, from replacing my colorful throw pillows with something more sophisticated to commenting that my artwork was a bit much for such a small space. Career achievements provided another fertile ground for comparisons. Kimberly's promotions were celebrated with family dinners at expensive restaurants. When I landed my current position at the design agency, a job I was genuinely proud to get, my mother's response was, "Well, I suppose it's stable employment. Though I'm not sure what you can really achieve in that field." The weekly Sunday family dinners became battlegrounds of subtle put-downs and passive-aggressive comments. My mother had perfected the art of the backhanded compliment, "That dress is so flattering on you, Abby. It really hides your problem areas." Or, "Your haircut is interesting. Very artistic, I suppose, which works for your type of job." One particularly painful dinner occurred after Kimberly won a high-profile case. My mother couldn't stop gushing. "Just imagine," she said, "my daughter's name in all the legal journals. People will remember this case for years." She turned to me with a tight smile. "Your little drawings are cute too, of course." I developed coping mechanisms to survive these encounters. I would mentally prepare before each family dinner, practicing responses to inevitable criticisms. I became an expert at changing the subject and deflecting attention. Sometimes I would simply withdraw, nodding and smiling while my mind wandered to anywhere but that dining room. My apartment became my sanctuary, the one place where I didn't have to compare myself to anyone. While small, it reflected my personality in a way my childhood bedroom never could. Colorful artwork covered the walls, many pieces created by friends from art school. Mismatched furniture found at thrift stores and flea markets gave the space character. Plants thrived on every windowsill. It was nothing like my sister's magazine-worthy home, and that was precisely why I loved it. My best friend Jasmine was the one person who truly understood what I was going through. We met in college and bonded over our shared love of art and complicated family dynamics. "You know this isn't normal, right?" Jasmine said one evening after I recounted my mother's latest criticism. We were sitting on my balcony, sharing a bottle of wine. "The way your mother treats you, it's emotional abuse." I remember flinching at the word abuse. It seemed too harsh, too dramatic. "She just wants what's best for me," I said automatically, repeating the justification I'd told myself for years. Jasmine fixed me with a serious look. "Does she?" Or does she want you to be a carbon copy of your sister? Because those are very different things, Abby. Her words stayed with me, prompting me to finally make an appointment with a therapist. Dr. Morris was a calm, thoughtful woman who helped me understand the toxic family patterns I'd been trapped in for so long. You've been assigned a role in your family, she explained during one of our sessions. The less successful daughter. But you need to understand that this role isn't based on reality, it's a narrative your mother has created and everyone has accepted, including you. Through therapy, I began to recognize how deeply these comparisons had affected me. My hesitancy to take risks in my career, my pattern of dating men who undervalued me, my tendency to downplay my achievements, all stemmed from this core belief that I wasn't good enough. Your mother's approval is not the measure of your worth, Dr. Morris told me repeatedly. It became a mantra I would silently repeat during difficult family interactions. But knowing something intellectually and breaking free emotionally are very different challenges. Despite my growing awareness, I still couldn't bring myself to confront the situation directly. The fear of rocking the boat, of potentially losing my family altogether, kept me trapped in the familiar pattern of seeking approval I knew I would never receive. So I continued attending the weekly dinners, continued accepting the criticisms and comparisons, continued playing my assigned role in the family drama. But something was changing inside me, a slow buildup of resentment and determination that would eventually reach its breaking point. 2 weeks ago, our family gathered for our usual Sunday dinner. I arrived at my parents' house with the familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. These dinners followed a predictable pattern. My mother would criticize my appearance within the first 5 minutes, my father would remain buried in his phone until called to the table, and Kimberly would attempt small talk that inevitably highlighted the growing distance between us. This particular evening, I had made an extra effort with my appearance, wearing a new dress and styling my hair the way my mother preferred, straight and sleek rather than my usual natural waves. A small act of preemptive appeasement that I hoped might spare me the usual criticisms. The house was unusually quiet when I arrived. Normally, my mother would be in the kitchen, directing my father on which wine to open or adjusting the table settings to her exacting standards. Instead, I found them all in the living room, an air of excited tension surrounding them. Kimberly and Nathan sat on the sofa, holding hands and smiling broadly. My mother perched on the edge of her favorite armchair, practically vibrating with excitement. Even my father looked up from his phone, a rare smile on his usually impassive face. "There you are, Abigail," my mother said, her tone making it clear I was late, though I had arrived at exactly the time she specified. "Kimberly has wonderful news." Kimberly stood up, still holding Nathan's hand. "We're pregnant," she announced. "Due in November." The room erupted in excitement, my mother actually clapped her hands together like a delighted child. My father stood to embrace Nathan with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. "That's wonderful news," I said, genuinely happy for my sister despite the complicated feelings that immediately followed. I moved to hug her, noticing how my mother was already discussing nursery colors and baby names. "And that's not all," Kimberly continued after the initial excitement died down. "I've been made partner at the firm. The youngest female partner in the firm's history." This announcement triggered another round of celebration. My mother was practically glowing with pride. "A baby and a partnership. Kimberly, you really do have it all." I offered my congratulations again, trying to ignore the familiar ache of inadequacy spreading through my chest. 2 major life achievements announced simultaneously, while I had recently been passed over for a promotion at the design agency. Dinner proceeded with Kimberly as the center of attention. My mother had prepared all of Kimberly's favorite dishes, including the roast beef that I had mentioned made me nauseous just the previous week. Every conversation circled back to either the pregnancy or the partnership. "Just think," my mother said as she served dessert, "my first grandchild and my daughter a partner at Preston and Hall. I couldn't be prouder." I sat quietly, pushing my cake around my plate. I should have been used to this by now, this feeling of invisibility at my own family table. But something about this particular dinner felt different. Perhaps it was the culmination of too many similar evenings, Or maybe it was the stark contrast between Kimberly's achievements and my recent disappointment at work. My mother turned to me suddenly, as if remembering I was there. "So, Abigail, anything new with you? Any men in your life?" Her tone made it clear she expected the answer to be no. "Actually, I've been working on a new design portfolio," I said, attempting to steer the conversation toward something positive in my life. My creative director was really impressed with. "Drawing again?" my mother interrupted with a dismissive wave. "At your age, you should be focusing on building a real career, not doodling. Look at what Kimberly has accomplished." I felt my face grow hot. "Graphic design is a real career, Mom. I've told you that countless times." "Well, it's not making you partner at a prestigious firm, is it?" She laughed lightly, as if she'd made a harmless joke. "Or giving me grandchildren." The table fell silent. Even Kimberly looked uncomfortable, staring down at her plate. My father cleared his throat but said nothing, his usual response to conflict. I took a deep breath, preparing to change the subject as I always did. But my mother wasn't finished. "You know, Abigail, this is exactly why you're still single. You lack ambition. Men want a woman who can challenge them, not someone who colors pictures for a living." I opened my mouth to respond, but she continued, her voice taking on the sneering tone that always preceded her cruelest comments. "You'll never be as good as your sister. I don't know why you even try." The room went completely still. I felt as if all the oxygen had been sucked out, leaving me unable to breathe. My stomach dropped, my face burned, and my hands began to shake uncontrollably under the table. In that moment, I wasn't just hearing this one comment, I was hearing every similar statement she had made throughout my life. Every comparison, every dismissal, every time she had made me feel less than. They all crashed over me like a tidal wave. My father stared down at his plate, his discomfort evident but his silence louder than any words. Kimberly wore an awkward smile, half embarrassed, half relieved that she wasn't on the receiving end of our mother's disapproval. I stood up so abruptly that my chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I need to go," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't be so sensitive, Abigail," my mother said, rolling her eyes. "I'm only trying to help you realize your potential." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I grabbed my purse and left without another word, ignoring my mother's calls about being dramatic and my father's weak suggestion that I stay for coffee. The drive home passed in a blur. Tears streamed down my face as I navigated the familiar route to my apartment on autopilot. Once inside, I collapsed on my sofa, finally allowing the full force of my emotions to surface. Between sobs, I found myself looking around my apartment, at the artwork I'd created, the space I'd built for myself. Was this really the life of someone without ambition? Someone who would never be good enough? I got up and walked to my bookshelf, pulling down a photo album from my childhood. Flipping through the pages, I saw the progression, a smiling, confident little girl gradually transforming into a withdrawn teenager, always positioned slightly behind her sister in family photos, always with a slightly forced smile. The pattern was so clear now, so undeniable. For years, I had accepted the role assigned to me. The lesser daughter, the disappointment, the one who would never measure up. I had internalized my mother's narrative so completely that it had become my own. Sitting there among the scattered photos of my life, I made a decision. This pattern had to end. I couldn't change my mother, but I could change how I responded to her. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the anger that had been buried beneath years of hurt and resignation. I was done trying to earn approval that would never come. Done accepting treatment that I would never tolerate from anyone else. Done living in my sister's shadow. Something had broken inside me at that dinner table, but maybe that something needed to break for me to finally be free. The morning after the disastrous family dinner, I called in sick to work. My head pounded from crying, and the thought of facing colleagues and pretending everything was normal felt impossible. Instead, I texted Jasmine, who arrived 40 minutes later with coffee and bagels. You look like hell, she said, but her eyes were kind as she handed me a coffee. I told her everything about the previous night, including my mother's devastating comment and my silent retreat. Jasmine listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly outraged. When I finished, she set her coffee down firmly on my coffee table. That's it. I've been saying this for years, but now I'm putting my foot down. You need to cut contact with these people, Abby. They're poison. Her directness shocked me. Cut contact? They're my family. Family doesn't treat you like this. Family doesn't make you feel worthless. Jasmine ran a hand through her curly hair in frustration. Do you realize you apologized 3 times while telling me this story? And not once did anyone in your family apologize to you. I hadn't noticed that, but she was right. Apologizing had become as automatic as breathing. Your mother is a classic narcissist, Jasmine continued. She's created this dynamic where Kimberly is the golden child and you're the scapegoat. And they all participate in it, your sister by accepting the preferential treatment, your father by saying nothing. Her assessment was brutal but aligned with what Dr. Morris had suggested in our therapy sessions. I called Dr. Morris that afternoon and scheduled an emergency appointment for the following day. What happened last night was significant, Dr. Morris said during our session. Not because your mother's behavior was unusual, it wasn't, but because your reaction to it was different. You removed yourself from the situation instead of enduring it. That's progress, Abigail. We spent the hour discussing family roles and how breaking established patterns often meets resistance. Your family has operated this way for decades, she explained. When you change how you respond, they'll initially push harder to get you to fall back in line. You need to be prepared for that. She suggested I start a truth journal to document instances of unfair comparison and my authentic feelings about them. Your perceptions have been invalidated for so long that you've learned to doubt yourself, she said. This journal will help you establish your own reality. That evening, I began researching family dynamics and the psychological effects of constant comparison. The more I read, the more I recognized myself in the descriptions of adults who had grown up in homes with strong favoritism. Many struggled with self-esteem issues, people-pleasing tendencies, and difficulty setting boundaries, all challenges I knew intimately. Over the next few days, I threw myself into self-improvement with the same dedication I had once applied to seeking my mother's approval. I declined the next family dinner with a brief text explaining I needed some time to myself. My phone immediately lit up with calls from my mother, which I let go to voicemail. Her messages ranged from confused to angry to guilt-inducing, a predictable pattern that I now recognized as manipulation rather than genuine concern. The following weekend, I visited a community art center I had passed many times but never entered. They offered adult classes and studio space for local artists. On impulse, I signed up for a mixed media workshop scheduled for the following week. The workshop was led by Tyler Jenkins, an art teacher with an easy smile and a talent for making everyone feel their work had value. When he complimented my use of color and perspective, I felt myself blushing, not just from the attention, but because I actually believed him. There was no comparison, no, but it could be better if, just genuine appreciation for what I had created. You have a unique style, he told me after class. Have you ever exhibited your work? I laughed nervously. No, it's just a hobby. The words came out automatically, my mother's dismissal echoing in my voice. Tyler looked at me curiously. It doesn't look like just a hobby to me. You have technical skill and a point of view. That's not something everyone has. His words stayed with me long after the workshop ended. What if my art wasn't just a hobby? What if the passion I had pushed aside to pursue a real career was actually my true calling? I returned to the center the following week, and the week after that. Each time, I felt more comfortable, more confident in my artistic voice. Tyler became a friend, someone who saw my potential without comparing it to anyone else's. Meanwhile, I continued working with Dr. Morris on developing boundaries. We role-played conversations I might have with my mother, practicing phrases like "I'm not comfortable with that comparison" and "I need you to speak to me with respect." At first, these phrases felt foreign on my tongue, almost impossible to imagine saying to my mother. But with practice, they became more natural. I began applying these boundaries in smaller, safer relationships first, telling a pushy coworker that I couldn't take on extra work, asking a friend to stop making jokes about my singlehood that had always made me uncomfortable. Each small success built my confidence for the bigger confrontation I knew was coming. My mother's calls and texts had become increasingly demanding as I maintained my distance. She had even sent my father to my apartment one evening, though I hadn't answered the door. Physical changes followed the emotional ones. I cut my hair into a style I had always wanted to try but had avoided, knowing my mother would disapprove. I cleaned out my closet, donating the conservative clothes I had purchased to please her and replacing them with items that reflected my artistic sensibility. Each change was small, but together they represented a reclaiming of my identity. Dr. Morris suggested additional confidence-building exercises. Making eye contact with strangers, practicing power poses before stressful situations, recording myself speaking and then listening without criticism. You need to become comfortable in your own authority, she explained. Your mother has been the authority in your life for so long that you need to practice taking that role for yourself. As the week of the next family dinner approached, I felt a mixture of dread and determination. I knew I couldn't avoid my family forever, nor did I want to. Despite everything, I loved them. But I also knew I couldn't return to the old pattern. Jasmine helped me prepare through role-play, taking on the persona of my mother with frightening accuracy. "You've lost weight, Abigail. Finally decided to take care of yourself," she would say, mimicking my mother's backhanded compliments. I would practice responding, "I haven't lost weight," and comments about my body aren't welcome. We went through dozens of scenarios, from subtle digs to outright criticisms. By the end of our practice session, I felt more prepared but still terrified. "Remember," Jasmine said as she hugged me goodbye, "you're not responsible for their reactions. You're only responsible for standing in your truth with dignity." The night before the dinner, I stood in front of my mirror, looking at my reflection, really looking, perhaps for the first time in years. I saw a woman with kind eyes and a creative spirit. A woman worthy of respect and love. A woman who had value entirely separate from comparisons to her sister. "You are enough," I told my reflection. "You have always been enough." The following Sunday, I arrived at my parents' house for dinner with a strange sense of calm. The anxiety that had been my constant companion at these gatherings was still present but muted, overshadowed by my newfound resolve. I had deliberately chosen my outfit to reflect my authentic self rather than my mother's preferences, a colorful dress with artistic patterns, paired with the handcrafted earrings I had made in Tyler's jewelry workshop. My hair was styled in its natural waves, and I wore minimal makeup. I looked like myself, perhaps for the first time in my parents' house. My mother opened the door, her eyes immediately scanning my appearance with her usual critical assessment. "Abigail, finally. We were beginning to think you'd forgotten how to find your way home." Her gaze lingered on my earrings. "Those are interesting. Didn't I get you those pearl studs for Christmas?" In the past, I would have apologized and made an excuse. Instead, I smiled and said, "I made these earrings myself. I'm taking a jewelry design class at the Community Art Center." Her expression flickered with surprise at my response. "Well, I suppose they're creative. Come in, your sister and Nathan are already here." The house smelled of roast chicken and fresh flowers. In the living room, Kimberly and Nathan sat close together on the sofa, while my father occupied his usual armchair with his ever-present phone. Kimberly looked up as I entered, her expression a mixture of relief and wariness. "Abby, you're here," she said, standing to hug me. Her small baby bump was now visible beneath her designer dress. "We were worried when you didn't come last week." "I needed some time," I said simply, accepting her hug. My father nodded at me without getting up, his version of a warm greeting. Dinner began with the usual ritual of my mother directing everyone to their seats and serving the food with commentary on each dish's preparation. The conversation initially centered on safe topics, the weather, a local restaurant that had recently opened, Nathan's golf game. Then, inevitably, the focus shifted to Kimberly's pregnancy and partnership. My mother had already started planning a baby shower that sounded more elaborate than most weddings I had attended. "I've been in touch with that event planner who did the Harriman wedding," she told Kimberly. "We're thinking a garden theme, with imported flowers to match the nursery colors." Kimberly looked slightly uncomfortable. "Mom, that sounds expensive and unnecessary. We'd be happy with something simple." My mother waved away her concern. "Nonsense. This is my first grandchild. It needs to be special." She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Abigail, you can help with the invitations. You're good with that artsy stuff." "Graphics design, Mom." "I'm a professional graphics designer," I corrected gently. Yes, she said dismissively. "Anyway, I was thinking we'd invite about 70 people. All the partners from Kimberly's firm, of course, and their wives. It will be the social event of the season." The conversation continued in this vein, with my mother planning ever more extravagant details while Kimberly made weak protests. I remained quiet, gathering my courage for what I knew needed to happen. Finally, my mother said the words I had been waiting for: "At least one of my daughters is giving me grandchildren." I was beginning to think I'd never have any. I set down my fork deliberately. "Mom, we need to talk about how you compare Kimberly and me." The table fell silent. My mother looked genuinely confused. "What are you talking about?" "The constant comparisons. The way you elevate everything Kimberly does while dismissing my achievements. The comments about my career, my appearance, my relationship status. It's hurtful, and it needs to stop." My mother's face hardened. "I don't know what's gotten into you lately, Abigail. I simply state facts. If you find them hurtful, perhaps you should work harder to improve yourself." "That right there," I said, my voice shaking slightly despite my preparation. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. You don't simply state facts. You make deliberate comparisons designed to make me feel inferior." "That's ridiculous," my mother scoffed. "You're being oversensitive, as usual." I took a deep breath, reminding myself of all the practice I had done with Jasmine and Dr. Morris. "Last week, you told me I would never be as good as Kimberly. Those were your exact words." "That's not stating facts, that's cruel and untrue." My mother's eyes widened with indignation. "I was trying to motivate you. You've always needed a push to achieve anything. Kimberly has drive, ambition. She sets goals and accomplishes them. You drift from one thing to another, expecting praise for minimal effort." Each word stung, but I was prepared for this reaction. I'm a successful graphic designer at a respected agency. I've recently started exploring my passion for fine art again. These aren't failures, Mom. They're just different from Kimberly's path. Different? My mother laughed coldly. Is that what we're calling it now? Kimberly is a partner at a prestigious law firm. She's married, expecting a child, owns a beautiful home. What do you have? A rented apartment full of craft projects? The old me would have crumbled under this attack. But I held firm even as tears threatened. What I have is a life that's authentic to who I am. I'm not Kimberly, and I was never meant to be. The problem isn't that I've failed to be like her, it's that you've failed to see and value me for who I actually am. My mother gasped. My father finally looked up from his plate, his expression unreadable. Kimberly and Nathan exchanged uncomfortable glances. How dare you speak to me that way, my mother said, her voice dangerously quiet. After everything I've sacrificed for you. Diana. My father's voice cut through the tension, surprising everyone. Let her speak. My mother turned to him in shock. James, are you taking her side? My father set down his napkin deliberately. This isn't about sides. But Abby's right. The comparisons have gone on too long. We've all noticed it, but none of us have had the courage to say anything. His unexpected support gave me strength to continue. Mom, I love you. I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval, trying to be good enough. But I've realized that's never going to happen as long as you measure me against Kimberly. That's not fair, my mother said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. I love both my daughters equally. Maybe you do, I acknowledged. But you don't treat us equally. And you don't respect my choices or see my value. Kimberly cleared her throat. She's right, Mom. Everyone turned to look at her in surprise. You've always compared us, and it's not fair to Abby. It's not fair to me either. You? My mother looked genuinely confused. How is it unfair to you? I've always supported you. You've supported a version of me that fits your narrative, Kimberly said quietly. The perfect daughter who never makes mistakes, never struggles, never disappoints. Do you have any idea how much pressure that puts on me? How terrified I am of failing. This revelation stunned me. I had never considered that the golden child role might come with its own burdens. And for the record, Kimberly continued, I've always been jealous of Abby's artistic talent. Of her courage to pursue what she loves despite your disapproval. My mother looked between us, her carefully constructed narrative crumbling before her eyes. I only wanted what was best for both of you, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I need you to understand something, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm not asking for your approval anymore. I'm asking for your respect. If you can't give me that, if you can't stop the comparisons and criticism, then I'll need to limit my time with you. You'd cut off your own mother? Her voice rose in outrage. No. I'd protect myself from continued emotional harm. There's a difference. I stood up, my dinner barely touched. I think I should go now. This has been a lot for everyone. Abigail, don't be dramatic, my mother said, but the usual authority in her voice had diminished. I'm not being dramatic, Mom. I'm setting a boundary. I picked up my purse. I love you all, but I need some space to figure out what kind of relationship we can have moving forward. I walked to the door, half expecting someone to try to stop me. No one did. As I stepped outside, I heard the muffled sound of my mother beginning to cry and my father's low voice attempting to comfort her. The drive home was nothing like the tearful escape of the previous dinner. Despite the emotional confrontation, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time in my adult life, I had spoken my truth without apology or compromise. I had no illusions that one conversation would change decades of family dynamics. But it was a beginning, the first step toward a healthier relationship with my family and, more importantly, with myself. The week following the confrontation was both liberating and terrifying. My phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from my mother, oscillating wildly between anger, how could you embarrass me like that, guilt-tripping, I cried all night, is that what you wanted, and occasional moments of something approaching introspection, perhaps we should talk more about your feelings. Dr. Morris had prepared me for this reaction. Setting boundaries with someone who has never respected them is like speaking a foreign language to them, she explained during our session. They don't understand it, and their initial response is often confusion, then resistance. With her guidance, I responded to my mother's messages selectively, acknowledging the more reflective ones while ignoring the manipulative attacks. I maintained my stance. I was open to rebuilding our relationship, but only if she was willing to respect my boundaries and work on her behavior. 3 days after the confrontation, I received a text from Kimberly asking if we could meet for coffee. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe halfway between our workplaces. When I arrived, Kimberly was already there, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Her usual confident demeanor had been replaced by something more vulnerable. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. I've been thinking about Sunday night nonstop. Me too, I admitted. I didn't expect it to go quite like that. She fiddled with her coffee cup. I want to apologize, Abby. I should have said something years ago about Mom's treatment of you. I knew it was wrong, but it was easier to stay silent. Her candor surprised me. Why didn't you? Honestly? Fear. She looked up at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Fear that if I wasn't the perfect daughter, if I didn't meet every expectation, I'd lose her approval too. I saw how she treated you, and I was terrified of becoming the target. It was a sobering admission. For years, I had envied Kimberly's golden child status without considering the prison it might also represent. Did you know I wanted to study art in college? Kimberly said suddenly. I stared at her in shock. What? No, I had no idea. She nodded. Junior year of high school, I took an art elective and loved it. I had a real talent for sculpture, according to my teacher. But when I mentioned possibly pursuing it in college, Mom shut it down immediately. Artists don't become successful, Kimberly. You're too smart for that. So I chose pre-law instead. I never knew, I said quietly. I've always envied your courage, Abby. The way you pursued your passion despite Mom's disapproval. I wish I'd had that strength. This revelation shifted something fundamental in my perception of our relationship. All these years, I had seen Kimberly as complicit in my mother's favoritism, benefiting from my diminishment. I had never considered that she might be trapped in her own way, forced into a mold that didn't quite fit. It's not too late, you know, I said. To explore your creativity. She smiled sadly. Maybe someday. Right now, I'm focused on the baby and the partnership. But I'd love to see your work sometime. Really see it, not just glance at it during family gatherings. We spent the next 2 hours talking more openly than we had in our entire adult lives. Kimberly shared her anxieties about motherhood and the pressure she felt to be perfect in every role. I told her about my renewed interest in fine art and my friendship with Tyler. He sounds special, she said with a knowing smile. It's not like that, I protested, though the warmth in my cheeks suggested otherwise. By the time we parted, something had shifted between us. The competitiveness instilled by our mother had begun to dissolve, replaced by the beginnings of genuine sisterhood. The following weekend, I received an unexpected visit from my father. He stood awkwardly at my door, holding a small package. Your mother doesn't know I'm here, he said as I invited him in. I found something I thought you should have. He handed me the package. Inside was a small sketchbook filled with drawings, my drawings, from when I was about 7 years old. I saved it when your mother was cleaning out the attic years ago, he explained. She was going to throw it away, said it was just childish scribbles. But I always thought they showed real talent, even then. I flipped through the pages, touched by this evidence that someone had seen value in my art even when I was a child. I should have said something, my father continued, his voice heavy with regret. All those years, when your mother compared you to Kimberly, when she dismissed your interests. I should have stood up for you. I'm sorry, Abby. His apology, so long overdue, brought tears to my eyes. Why didn't you? He sighed deeply. Your mother is formidable. Early in our marriage, I learned it was easier to go along with her than to challenge her. But that's no excuse. I failed you as a father. We talked for nearly 2 hours. My father shared insights into my mother's background, her own critical parents, the pressure she had faced to be perfect, the dreams she had abandoned to become a wife and mother. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped me understand it. She's struggling with what happened at dinner, he admitted. She's not ready to admit she was wrong, but I think you've given her something to think about. Just, don't give up on her entirely, Abby. She does love you, in her way. After my father left, I felt a strange mix of sadness and hope. The family dynamics that had shaped my life were deeply entrenched, but not immutable. Change was possible, even if it would be slow and imperfect. At work, my growing confidence began to manifest in unexpected ways. When our creative director announced a major new client pitch, I volunteered to lead the design team, something I would never have done before. I've had some ideas I'd like to present, I said during the planning meeting, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. My concept for the campaign was bold, artistic, and unlike anything our agency had produced before. In the past, I would have toned down my vision, afraid of rejection. This time, I presented it with conviction. "This is remarkable, Abby," my creative director said when I finished my presentation. "It's exactly what this client needs. I want you to lead the pitch." The project consumed my working hours for the next week, but I felt energized rather than drained. For the first time, I was bringing my full creative self to my professional work, without apology or restraint. Meanwhile, my friendship with Tyler continued to develop. We began meeting outside of the art center, for coffee, for gallery visits, for long walks where we discussed everything from color theory to childhood memories. "My mother always encouraged my creativity," he told me during one of these walks. "She was an art teacher before she retired. Our house was like a permanent art studio, projects everywhere, paint on every surface." "That sounds wonderful," I said, unable to hide the wistfulness in my voice. Tyler stopped walking and turned to face me. "You're an artist, Abby. A real one. Not because of how you were raised or in spite of it, but because that's who you are at your core. Nothing can take that away from you." His words, so simple yet so profound, settled into my heart like a balm. I had spent so long seeking external validation that I had forgotten the most important approval came from within. The Community Art Center announced an upcoming exhibition for local artists, and Tyler encouraged me to submit my work. The thought was terrifying, putting my art on public display, opening myself to criticism and judgment. But I had faced my mother's criticism and survived. Surely I could handle strangers' opinions. I selected 3 pieces for submission: a mixed-media collage exploring family dynamics, an abstract painting capturing the feeling of breaking free from constraints, and a self-portrait that showed both vulnerability and strength. The selection committee accepted all 3. As I prepared for the exhibition while simultaneously working on the client pitch, I realized something profound. I was no longer defining myself in relation to Kimberly or seeking my mother's approval. I was building an identity based on my own values, interests, and strengths. This revelation didn't make me invincible to doubt or immune to the occasional craving for parental approval. But it gave me a foundation that couldn't be shaken by external criticism, a sense of self that was wholly mine. The night of the art exhibition arrived with a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. The community center had been transformed, its utilitarian spaces now elegant and purposeful. My 3 pieces hung on the main wall, lit perfectly to highlight their details and emotional impact. Tyler found me hiding in a corner, practicing deep breathing techniques Dr. Morris had taught me. "There are already people discussing your work," he said with a grin. "Good discussions, not the 'what is this supposed to be' kind." I laughed, my anxiety easing slightly. "I still can't believe I'm doing this. Putting myself out there like this." "Believe it," he said, squeezing my hand. "You're ready." The evening progressed with a steady stream of visitors moving through the exhibition. I received compliments from strangers, constructive feedback from other artists, and even an inquiry about purchasing my self-portrait. Each interaction built my confidence, reinforcing that my art had value beyond my own perception of it. About an hour into the event, I looked up to see an unexpected sight: my entire family entering the gallery. My mother, looking uncharacteristically uncertain, led the group, followed by my father, Kimberly, and Nathan. I froze, unprepared for their presence. We had maintained limited contact in the weeks since the confrontation, with brief text exchanges and one stilted phone call with my mother. Their appearance at my exhibition felt significant, a gesture I hadn't anticipated. My father spotted me first and guided the group in my direction. "Surprise," he said with an awkward smile. "Kimberly told us about your exhibition. We thought we should be here." "All of you?" I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. My mother stepped forward, her eyes darting to my artwork and back to me. "These are quite impressive, Abigail. You've always had talent." It wasn't effusive praise, but coming from her, it was monumental. I noticed the effort it took her to offer even this modest compliment, her discomfort evident in her rigid posture and tight smile. "Thank you," I said simply. "It means a lot that you came." Kimberly embraced me warmly. "These are amazing, Abby. Truly. I'm so proud of you." I introduced them to Tyler, watching with amusement as my mother's appraising gaze took in his artistic attire and easy confidence. To my surprise, she was polite, even charming, asking him about his own work and his role at the center. As we moved through the exhibition together, I observed my mother's attempts to connect with me. Her comments were awkward, sometimes missing the mark, but I recognized them for what they were. Efforts to bridge the chasm that had grown between us. When we reached my self-portrait, she studied it for a long moment in silence. "You've captured something here," she finally said. "A strength I didn't always see." The admission, however small, felt monumental. In her own way, she was acknowledging that she had missed something essential about me. "I'm learning to see it myself," I replied. The evening marked the beginning of a new phase in our family dynamics. It wasn't a fairy tale transformation. My mother didn't suddenly become a different person, free from her judgmental tendencies and need for control. But something had shifted, creating space for a more authentic relationship to develop. In the weeks that followed, my professional life blossomed alongside these personal changes. Our team won the client pitch, with the CEO specifically praising my design concept as bold and innovative. My creative director called me into his office the following week. "I've been watching your work evolve over the past month," he said. "The confidence, the creativity, it's like you've finally taken off the training wheels. I'd like to offer you a promotion to senior designer." The promotion I had been passed over for just months earlier was now mine, not because I had changed my artistic style to please others, but because I had finally allowed my authentic creative voice to emerge. My relationship with Tyler continued to develop, but I maintained my independence, careful not to repeat patterns of seeking validation through romantic relationships. He respected this boundary, supporting my journey without trying to direct it. The most profound changes, however, occurred within my family. My mother, to my surprise, began seeing a therapist of her own. "Your father suggested it," she told me during a one-on-one lunch we had arranged. "He thinks I have some issues to work through." Her tone was defensive, but the very fact that she was seeking help represented enormous progress. "It takes courage to look at yourself honestly," I said, resisting the urge to point out how long I had been suggesting therapy. She pursed her lips. "My therapist says I may have been projecting my own insecurities onto you girls. Particularly you, Abigail." The admission clearly cost her, but she continued. "Apparently, I have what she calls perfectionist tendencies." I bit back a smile at this massive understatement. "That sounds insightful." "She also suggests I may have been harder on you because you remind me of myself at your age. Before I gave up my own creative pursuits to marry your father." She glanced away, uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I wanted to be an interior designer, you know. My parents thought it wasn't a proper career for someone of my background." This revelation stunned me. My mother, the ultimate pragmatist, had once harbored creative dreams of her own? The parallels were striking. Our relationship remained complicated, with occasional backsliding into old patterns. But we were both making efforts, me by maintaining my boundaries while remaining open to connection, her by attempting, however imperfectly, to see and accept me as I was. Kimberly and I developed a closeness that had eluded us throughout childhood and early adulthood. Free from the competitive dynamic our mother had fostered, we discovered genuine enjoyment in each other's company. When her son was born, a beautiful, healthy boy named James after our father, I became Aunt Abby, a role I embraced with joy and creativity. My father made his own quiet amends, showing up at my second exhibition 6 months later, proudly pointing out details in my work to other attendees. "My daughter sees the world differently," I overheard him telling a colleague he had invited. "That's what makes her art so powerful. 3 months after the initial exhibition, I decided to host a dinner at my apartment, the first time I had invited my family into my space since the confrontation. The gathering represented a symbolic reclaiming. I was no longer hiding my true self or apologizing for my choices. My colorful, artistic home, once dismissed by my mother as cluttered and bohemian, was now the setting for a new kind of family interaction, one based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy and comparison. As we sat around my mismatched vintage dining set, eating from handmade ceramic plates I had created in a pottery class, I looked at each face and recognized the journey we had all undertaken. My mother, still occasionally bristling when things didn't meet her standards but making visible efforts to check herself. My father, more engaged and expressive than I had ever seen him. Kimberly, relaxing into motherhood with a naturalness that surprised her most of all. Tyler, a welcome addition to our complicated family circle. And me, finally comfortable in my own skin, my own home, my own life. Standing up to my mother hadn't magically fixed everything. The work of redefining our relationships was ongoing and sometimes difficult. There were still painful moments, disagreements, and misunderstandings. But beneath it all ran a current of authenticity that had been missing before, a willingness to see each other as we truly were rather than as roles in a family drama. The most profound change was within myself. I no longer measured my worth against my sister's achievements or my mother's approval. I had discovered my own metrics for success, creative fulfillment, genuine connections, integrity to my values. Standing up hadn't just changed my family dynamics, it had freed me to become fully myself. As the evening wound down and we finished the last of the dessert, I caught my mother watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Not the critical assessment I was accustomed to, but something more complex, perhaps a mixture of regret, pride, and something like respect. "You've built a good life here, Abigail," she said quietly. "It's not what I would have chosen for you, but it suits you." Coming from her, it was tantamount to a blessing. I accepted it with the grace of someone who no longer needed her approval but could still appreciate its offering. "Thank you, Mom. I think so too." Has anyone in your family ever compared you to a sibling or relative? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about finding your authentic voice. Remember, standing up for yourself doesn't mean cutting people off, it means inviting them to know the real you. Thank you for listening, and I hope this story gives you courage to write your own.